Now, Nigeria moves to establish a comprehensive regulatory framework for the country's housing sector following the industry's contribution of more than 77 trillion naira to the Nigerian economy in 2025, despite operating without a unified regulatory system. Adetola Akinshulire, Group Chief Commercial Officer at Mixter Nigeria, joins me now for more on the country's strategy and other catalysts needed to spur growth. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, sir. Let's start first and foremost with the contribution we saw from the real estate sector. The minister pegs it at 77 trillion naira. Do you think that fully encapsulates the sort of contribution the real estate sector really provided for the economy last year? And what sort of numbers can we expect this year?
Okay. Thank you very much, and a pleasure for me to be here. The 77 trillion number, which the minister puts, is the combination of both real estate and construction.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at real estate, it's just 41 trillion.
Yeah.
But that aside, I think in terms of where the industry has moved and the sort of progress we've seen in terms of creativeness, driving construction, I would say that level of contribution, moving it up to the top three sectors, I think, yes, that is warranted. It's something which the industry should be praised for, especially the practitioners, in terms of how they've been able to work within the limited constraints that they have in the industry to still deliver that sort of value for the industry.
But give me a number now. How big does the picture get for the remainder of this year, moving from 77 trillion naira? Do you think we would see another significant leap?
Now, are we going to see another significant leap? I mean, that would depend on a number of factors. So, first and foremost, I know the government at this point in time is trying to do a couple of reforms within the industry. For me, I believe the value of those reforms will be judged in terms of three things it can deliver. Enhance trust within the industry, that's number one. Also be able to drive funding for buyer finance access and also construction access. If we can see this sort of transformation from the reforms that the government is proposing, yes, I see that we should be able to have some additional leaps within the industry. I'm not going to tie myself to a number.
You're playing coy with the number.
No, I'm not going to tie myself to that number at this point in time.
Yes. Let's now talk about the reforms and the sort of initiatives the government is taking now. We're having the proposed National Housing and Built Environment Regulation Policy as well as the National Mortgage Industry Policy. That's a lot that the government is looking to take on at this point in time. Yes, stakeholders' engagement. This literally signals the final stage before it gets presented to the Federal Executive Council. But walk me through how Mixter Africa is unpacking each layer of this policy document. What's achievable? Where should we adjust our targets or be more realistic, and then the bigger cautions for you? Okay,
so let's look at the different components of the framework which the minister has released. So at the moment he's released 6 core pillars. You have the registration of developers, you have buyer protection like the escrow, you've got land value management, you've got quality management, you've got urban renewal, and at the same time you've got your database. Now, all these are addressing 2 core areas. They are addressing the trust deficits which you have in the industry, and at the same time, they're also trying to address the issue of buyer finance. There is still one leg of that is missing, and that is the construction finance. Now, for us as Mixter, you ask us what have we been doing. One of the things which we do at Mixter is we believe that as a developer, we can not only focus on just the micro aspect of what we do in terms of our day-to-day development. We have to engage with the government in terms of being able to address this issue. So, for example, as I've pointed out, there is one aspect of that regulatory reform that they're pushing out, which is still missing, which if we're going to address the huge housing deficit that we have, we also need to face it.
Don't you think that's where the proposed National Housing Data Observatory will come in?
No, it is just to give information and data and record. So, for example, one of the things which the minister talked about is that, look, there has been so much information that has been bantered about the housing deficit. 15 million, 20 million, 28 million, however it is. Based on what they have in terms of using the World Bank guidelines, they're saying it's 15 million. It's those sort of data tracking they want to do, but data tracking does not provide funding to supply homes. That is still an aspect of the regulatory reform that still needs to be addressed.
Okay. And then let's also look at the mortgage industry policy as well. this is looking to establish the National Housing Finance Authority. We have the Federal Mortgage Bank, that's there. Yeah. We've had other similar policy initiatives. What's wrong with those? Why do we need to establish a new policy document when we already have other initiatives that somewhat have not met their targets?
Okay. So I think first and foremost, let's look at the history of these various mortgage financing institutions you've had. So you have the National Housing Fund, which is managed by the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria. Now, it seems like, based on what the minister has said, that's actually a core focus of what they want to reform. Because if you remember, one of the things which he said was that they're also looking at bringing out the other non-traditional work employees into the system, whereby people can pay as low as 5,000.
I'm shaking my head here, Mr. Adetola, because at the end of the day, when you also look at it, looking at the 25% you can use for your mortgage, you look at a Nigerian who has worked 10 years, the cumulative sum does not even amount to 15 to 20 million naira, for example. And then when you look at the price ranges of some of the houses on those websites, a decent two-bedroom goes for as high as, say, you wouldn't even say it's decent. It's about a 120, 160, 200 million naira range. So there is no average Nigerian who can afford those.
Okay. So now, you see, you've asked me a very simple question with a complicated answer. And now I have a job of making it a very simple answer. So first and foremost, let's even talk about affordability. Most of the time when you talk about affordability, you talk about it within the context of what you are saying, the price of the home. But the way in which I like to look at affordability is not just the price of the home. You're talking about the duration it takes for people to pay for the home. So, for example, a 60 million home is unaffordable if you want to pay for it in 2 years. But if I give you the option of paying that same property in 30 years, for example, it becomes affordable. And so, the way
We've been on the website several times. The 60 million, it's almost non-existent in places like Lagos or Abuja.
So now let me rate you.
Where we reside.
So, it's interesting that you have to raise that number up, because one of the things, I actually have a special team in my office whereby one of the things we are focused on at this moment is trying to do a bit of research and development, still working with our traditional construction method to be able to come up with what we call starter homes. Starter homes which will be able to fit the typical price point of literally everybody who is just trying to start on the housing ladder. Because it's very important that you get everybody on the housing ladder. So, coming back to the overall conversation, so first thing here, they need to try and find a way of reforming the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, which manages the NHF. There are so many things they need to reform. There are other aspects that are already working. So, for example, you have the MREIF. The MREIF, which was launched last year, was able to raise as much as 250 billion. Over 100 billion out of that came from the private sector. And within a space of just 1 year, they've been able to give out about 1,900 mortgages. And this is spread across at least 22 states of the Federation. So it's not just Lagos, Abuja, and Port Harcourt. I know the look of that face. So what I'm saying here is this. There is already a process. I'm curious in terms of what they're going to do with the NHF, in terms of what sort of reform. So we don't have the details of the policy document. I wish I could have been the fly on the wall to actually
into those conversations,
because that's really
the core.
The core. How are you doing that?
Yes. And talking about how we're doing that as well, too, before I had my concerns raised there, we were talking about how this also extends to traders, artisans, commercial drivers, and contributing a 5,000 naira monthly peg. I've not seen how this works in advanced climes, but if we were to speak to an ideal scenario, how do you think this could translate to quantifiable inclusion?
Quantifiable inclusion. You see, first and foremost, there is what you call effective demand. What I mean by effective demand is the demand of people for homes that actually have the capacity and the income generation power to be able to sustain whatever payment structure, whether it's a mortgage, however it is. The problem with when you have this sort of generalist conversations that just basically puts on high-sounding ideas is until I see the details of how they're trying to bring these people in, I really, really want to comment about that. But one thing I can tell you that a lot of PMIs are actually lending to those non-structured non-structured lenders, borrowers who don't have your traditional monthly salaries, businessmen, those sort of things, traders. Basically, as long as you can prove you have a source of income that is consistent, they'll find a way of structuring it.
The informal nature of the business makes it quite...
they will structure it, make it work for them.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you now say you want to make it for everybody, it now becomes a lot more complicated.
Yes, yes. And then it's also looking to create structured diaspora housing investment window. I don't have a problem with that, because then these individuals are bringing their dollars and euros and pounds sterling. So it's an attraction. That's one of the quickest wins I think we'll be able to take on there. Your take now around that structured diaspora housing investment window, what does that picture look like for you?
Well, for me, I will look at it from the perspective of even the people that we speak with on a day-to-day basis in terms of trying to distribute our products. I know there is significant demand by a number of people within the diaspora to own homes, to own properties, to have investment back in Nigeria. And the government is basically just tying in and keying into that demand that already exists by providing this window. So I think it is something that should be encouraged, because you're talking to a bunch of people who are already used to mortgages.
Yes.
It's something which they are familiar. So in terms of education, the time to convert them is a lot shorter as long as the structure and the framework and the pricing works for them.
Yes. Wrapping up the conversation, let's talk about some of the, should I say, interesting insights Mixed Africa is also observing at this point in time. Offsite plans, the sort of financing arrangements we have, the role of the private sector, and whether or not, yes, inflation is decelerating somewhat, but do you think the cost of building materials, the price increases we're seeing, the cement prices actually rose, and then FCCPC is still doing its investigation into the probe around the sort of spike we're seeing in cement prices. So what sort of price ranges can we now expect going forward? If I were to look into your crystal ball, give me some insider information here. A two-bedroom, for example.
Okay. So the only thing that would change the pricing of properties, for example, like your two-bedroom that you mentioned, is the innovation of the developers. Like I said, one of the things which I have a team in my office currently working on at the moment is trying to come up with a starter home that, let me use the word, falls within your 60 to 70 million price, because that's where you have the bulk of the market. And if we're trying to address this housing deficit, we need to find a way of tapping to where you have the bulk of the people. Or else we're just basically playing talk shows, meeting with each other and just slapping ourselves high fives for delivering some number that really doesn't move the needle.
Yes, we really need solutions that are workable, practical. Thank you so much for your time, sir. That was Adetola Akinshulira, Group Chief Commercial Officer at Mixed Africa.